Ever been on a family holiday to Scotland? Rolling hills, dramatic cliffs, maybe a whiskey tour or two. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? But back in the 16th century, those cliffs and caves weren't just for postcard views. They hid one of the darkest chapters in Scottish history. Scotland once had a family so terrifying it would put the Hills of Eyes movies to shame. For over 2 decades, an entire clan turned the Ayrshire coast into their personal all-you-can-eat buffet. And I'm not talking about haggis. By the end of this, you'll know how Sawney Bean and his brood went from living in a cave to becoming one of the most gruesome legends in history. Grab a brew and tighten your kilt, because this tale of murder, mystery, and questionable dining choices is one you won't forget. Alexander Sawney Bean wasn't born into luxury. According to the legend, he was just another working class lad who decided that honest graft wasn't for him. Somewhere along the line, he met a woman as twisted as he was. Together, they settled in a cave along the Ayrshire coast, far from the prying eyes of the law. Not the dream starter home most couples have in mind, but for Sawney, it was perfect. This cave wasn't your usual rocky hole in the wall. It stretched over 200 yards into the cliffside, complete with secret nooks and crannies for storing, well, let's call it, fresh supplies. It flooded during high tide, which should have been a deal breaker, but for Sawney and his missus, it was the ideal setup to avoid nosy neighbours. When most people think of feeding the family, they picture a trip to the supermarket or maybe for the elite hunting game. Not the Beans. Their menu came with a twist, and it wasn't a Michelin star kind of twist. They turned to highway robbery, ambushing unsuspected travellers and turning them into the evening roast. No leftovers, no evidence, and definitely no conscience. You've got to wonder about the first meal. Did Sawney lean over to his wife and say, "This needs a bit more salt, love"? Or was it more like, "Can you just pass me the plate of fingers, please"? Dark humour aside, the fact that an entire family not only embraced this lifestyle, but thrived off it for decades, is a level of twisted that's hard to wrap your head around. The Bean family didn't just stick to the two of them for long. Over the years they had children, and those children had children. Generations grew up in that damp, dark cave, knowing no other life than the one of ambush, murder, and unconventional diet. It wasn't long before the family swelled to nearly 50 members. Imagine a twisted version of a family reunion. Pass the arm, auntie. What's even more chilling is that they operated under the radar for over 25 years. People in nearby towns noticed travellers going missing, but no one could figure out where they were disappearing to. It was as if the countryside was swallowing them whole, which, in a way, here's where things take a turn. A young couple, fresh off their honeymoon, found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Beans set upon them, as they did countless others, but this time they bit off more than they could chew, literally and figuratively. The husband fought back with everything he had, managing to fend off the attackers long enough for a group of passerbyers to come to their aid. The survivors ran straight to the local authorities, and for the first time, the Beans' activity was on full display. Witnesses spoke of the horrors they saw in that cave. Bones piled high, personal belongings stripped from victims, and a stench so foul it could knock you sideways. The cave was less a home and more of a grotesque monument to decades of depravity. Word of the Beans' crimes spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of King James VI himself. He wasn't about to let a clan of cannibalistic murderers tarnish his kingdom's reputation. The king assembled a hunting party, complete with horses, bloodhounds and armed soldiers, and descended upon the Beans' hideout. When they were finally captured, the Beans didn't exactly roll over and apologise. Reports say they fought tooth and nail, but they were no match for the king's forces. They were dragged to Edinburgh, where justice was swift and brutal. The men were executed by being drawn and quartered, while the women and children faced equally horrific fates. So what do you make of the Sawney Bean legend? Historians debate its authenticity, with some calling it a grim fairy tale cooked up to tarnish Scotland's name. Others argue there's enough evidence to tarnish the name already. In all seriousness, others suggest the beans were very real and very horrifying. True or not, the story serves as a chilling reminder of what humanity is capable of, even when it is consumed by darkness. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Would you fancy a walk along the Ayrshire coast now? Maybe pack a fresh steak for a possible ditch and run, just to be safe.